Hey guys! Well, in this week's video we're going to continue working on the Y-axis, and today we're going to be doing some assembly. Now, one last piece to this puzzle that I had to machine was this spacer. Now this spacer goes in between the tapered roller bearings, like so. Now, we could put the bearings like this, back to back, but it doesn't give you a whole lot of width there for stability. So the initial reasoning behind it was to give it a little bit more width, and then that way it has more, side to side play that you can get out of the system. So the way it goes together is like this, and then that goes into the bearing block, like so. And then like that. And then we have our bearing cap that goes on and gets bolted on there. Now that keeps that whole bearing pack tight. And then you can see that I left a little bit of distance here. Hopefully you can see that there's a little space there, maybe 10 thou. And then that way it'll keep it tight when I bolt it down. Once we have that bolted down and insert the ball screw, then we're going to have this piece. This is steel, just a steel washer, and then of course a couple of jam nuts, and that's how the whole assembly goes together. Now for the linear rail conversion, we switched over to tapered roller bearings. These are Timken. The bearing is A4059 and the race is A4138. I did this because the linear rail conversion, I want the whole machine to be more rigid, and with the tapered roller bearings I think you get more rigidity, so we switched over to the tapered roller bearings. Originally we had the AC bearings, and they're nice. You can set preload, however you don't have as much lateral rigidity, so we swapped over to the Timken roller bearings. Now we've swapped over the kits to also accept either tapered roller bearings, or they will accept the AC bearings like they did originally. The difference being is that little step down here inside. You can see a little step, and you didn't need that with the AC bearings. However, with the tapered roller bearings, you can see how they stick down below there. So that little recess lets the bearing clear. So when it goes in, it has that little recess in there and it clears. Just a little bit of added extra step there in machining, but it allows you to use both the tapered roller or the AC bearings. The overall thickness of the bearings is the same, but as you can see, the race there is a little bit thinner on the Timken roller bearing, and so therefore that's going to change the dimension on your spacer. But these spacers are all custom fit anyway. So what I want to do now is I just want to get this assembled. I'm going to grease these bearings, get everything assembled, and we'll be installing that on our C5 ground ball screws here for the Y-axis. And then we're going to have to bed these roller bearings, and we'll do that. We'll just let it run on the lathe for a while and get them hot and heated up and get them bedded. And once we do that, we can assemble everything, and then we can start working on the ball nut mount for the Y axis, and maybe get that installed on the linear rail conversion. Alright, now to pack these bearings, I'm just going to use Mobile 1 EP1. This is just general purpose grease. For the spindle bearings, I use the Kluber Isoflex 15, the NBU 15. However, it's not really needed for these, so I don't think we really need to put the Kluber in there. I may be wrong, but for now I'm just going to pack it with just standard lube, and we'll go from there. These are M4 by 7 cap screws by 12 millimeter. now we have that assembled. We can just slide it down over our ball screw. We're going to put our steel washer that we made. You can see it protrudes past the cover here slightly, so that when we tighten up our nut here, it presses those two bearings tight together. We want to kind of set the preload. Okay, I've got it tight so that when I turn it, the whole thing's turning. It feels real smooth. I couldn't remember if I used the jam nut or not on these new ball screws, but these square nuts here have these set screws so that you can lock it down, so I think one's going to be plenty. I don't want to get it too tight. That feels pretty good. So what we'll do now is we'll just run it on the lathe and bed this bearing in, and then we'll check it along the way, make sure it's not getting too tight. But right there feels really good. Alright, so let's go out to the G0602. Alright guys, well I'm out on the lathe, and I'm just breaking in this bearing assembly here. It's just turning freely, and I've got it just resting up against tool fork actually here, but so it doesn't spin, and I'm just letting it run, trying to get it all hot so the bearings can bed in. And I'm just running it through some different speeds. Started at 200, 500, 750, 1,000 sorry, scared me, I touched the nut here. 1,000 RPMs, that kind of thing. And I'll just let this run and bed these bearings in, and then we'll be ready to go. Come back every once in a while and just check it, make sure it's not getting too hot. Should be okay. Probably seeing a little bouncing right here. It's because I've got this ball screw clamped in my lathe chuck here with a PVC pipe, so it's not really concentric, but it's okay for this purpose. Alright, I'm going to let this run for a while, and then we'll come back and check on it later. It's been running for about, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes now. Back down to 250 RPMs. I went from 250, 500, 750, 1,000, 1250, and then worked my way back down. Waited for it to get real warm, at 1250 and then started breaking it back down, and now they're getting the block slowly getting cooler and cooler, and that should be good. I'm going to, there's no need in me going to assemble this because I'll have to take this bearing block back off the ball screw to assemble it on the machine, so I'm not going to go ahead and assemble it. One thing I wanted to point out is you can see there's some movement here on the bearing block, but it's the same amount of movement on the ball screw. I've got it clamped in the chuck here with just a piece of PVC pipe around it, so I think that's where my wobble's coming from. And more importantly, I want to make sure that this surface right here it's not doing this as it's spinning, and you can see it's nice and vertical. So I know that everything's seated square, so I don't have to worry about that any. Pretty happy with the way the Y-axis bearing block and everything turned out. Alright, so I've got the Y-axis bearing block. We've broken the bearings on the G0602, and now I have it mounted to the Precision Matthews. I've pulled the table off, set it aside, and I'm checking now the distance between the bottom of the saddle here, the mounting point, to get a measurement on my Y-axis ball nut mount. Now this particular one right here I machined for something else and I didn't use it, so I'm going to probably cut this down and repurpose it for the linear rail conversion. I've drawn it up in Fusion 360. I'll just get this final measurement, and then we'll take this to the mill and we'll machine this out. This just has a single bung that goes in the bottom of the saddle here, but I need to get an accurate measurement for this height, and it's going to be about 9.4 millimeters to the bottom of the saddle here, and then the bung, I guess you would say, is going to stick up about 10 millimeters, and that will go into the bottom of the saddle here, and then that's how it will fasten. Now, one thing that I was a little concerned about was this particular double ball nut for the C5 series ground ball screws is a good bit longer than the C7s, and so I was worried that I was not going to get enough travel. Now, I did the measurements and checked it, and everything looks okay. The linear rail conversion may not have as much wide travel as with the standard conversion. I'm only going to go up to about right there. I need to leave a little room. I don't want the trucks, the bearing blocks to come off the rails there. I'll probably machine some kind of Teflon stops to go here or something, just to make sure. And also in the back, I need to have some kind of a stop just to prevent these bearing blocks from coming off. Once they come off and you lose the rods that are in there for these RG rails, it's a pain, so we don't want to be messing with that. But yeah, that's it. It travels really nice. No kind of wobble or anything like that, so I think we're going to be okay. But you can see it's quite a bit long, and so we're going to machine that off. So in the next video, we're going to take this out to the mill and we're going to take care of that. Alright guys, well that wraps up this video. We'll get this assembled in the next video and try to start getting some of this mounted. Guys, if you're new to my channel and you're just tuning in, click on the subscribe button down here below. When I post a new video, they'll send you a link, and if it's something you're interested in, you can stop by and check it out. As always, please feel free to ask questions, make suggestions, or leave comments. Thanks for watching the video. Thumbs up if you like the video. Please subscribe, and most importantly, be safe.